Welcome again. I'm Allison Dahl, co-chair of the Committee on Lectures and a member of the World Affairs Series Planning Committee. And it is my great pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker. Paul Watson founded the world's leading direct action ocean conservation organization, the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. Since 2002, he and his crew have attempted to stop Japanese ships from hunting whales in Antarctica, documented in Animal Planet's series Whale Wars. A co-founder of Greenpeace and the Greenpeace Foundation, he has also worked for Defenders of Wildlife, Fund for Animals, and Friends of the Wolf, and has served on the national board of the Sierra Club USA. He is also the author of several books, including Sea Shepherd, My Fight for Whales and Seals, Earth Force, An Earth Warrior's Guide to Strategy, Ocean Warrior, My Battle to End the Illegal Slaughter on the High Seas, Seal Wars, 25 Years on the Front Lines with the Harp Seals, and Cry Wolf. Please join me in welcoming Paul Watson.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, yesterday I was in Paris. Now I'm here. That means it's about 2 o'clock in the morning for me, but I'll try not to fall asleep. Thank you for coming out and hearing me. The film that you saw, is about 7 years of campaigning against the Japanese whaling fleet, which this year paid off. We drove them out of the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary a month and a half in advance. They took only 15% of their quota, and I don't think they're going to come back. So I think that the whale wars is over there. However, if they do come back, we will be prepared to go back down there to defend the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. There's a lot of really misunderstandings about what the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society is. We get called a lot of names, everything from being pirates to eco-terrorists. The pirate thing didn't bother me. We just adopted our own pirate flag in response to that, and people wanted us to be pirates. Well, hell, we'll be pirates. We don't care. If you go back to the 17th century, it wasn't the British Navy or the Spanish Navy that shut down piracy in the Caribbean. Too many politicians on the take, too many bribes being paid. Not much different than the way things are today. And so piracy was shut down by one man, Henry Morgan, who was a pirate. So if you want to stop pirates, you need pirates to do it. And we target illegal operations, always have done so, which is the reason that after sinking 9 ships and destroying tens of millions of dollars worth of property on the high seas, we've never gone to jail, haven't been convicted of a felony, never been sued. The last place that criminals want to be is in court, so they don't take us to court. On occasion, we have gone to court, mainly over protecting seals in Canada, but we've always won our cases. But then we get called eco-terrorists. I don't even know what an eco-terrorist is. I thought it was BP or Union Carbine or Exxon. But we get called that a lot. There isn't actually a crime called eco-terrorism, but the people we go against have a lot of money to invest in public relations firms, and so they decided that's what they're going to call us. But my answer to that is really, look, either arrest me or shut the hell up. It's getting a little tiring. If we were an eco-terrorist, I wouldn't be able to get on an airplane, and I wouldn't be able to cross borders, and so, it's just all rhetoric and propaganda, so I'm not too concerned about that. I set up the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society as a different kind of organization. We don't protest. I don't like protesting. I was one of the co-founders of Greenpeace, and to me, protesting is a very submissive thing to do. It's like, please, please, please don't kill the whales. And they do it anyway. Nobody kills whales in front of us. The last time I saw a whale die was in 1977 when I was with Sea Shepherd. Before I started Sea Shepherd. Because when we show up, they don't kill whales. And the reason being is they know that we will be very aggressive. And what we've developed over this year is this approach which I call aggressive nonviolence. And that means we don't hurt anybody, never have injured anybody, haven't sustained any injuries, and we don't break the law, but we do destroy equipment which is used to illegally exploit marine species. For instance, in 1986, we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet and destroyed their whale processing plant and shut down their operations for 17 years. Now, on the surface, that might seem highly illegal. You go into Reykjavik and sink 2 ships in their harbor. It sounds like it's a criminal thing, and I waited a year trying to get an answer from the Icelandic government as to whether they're going to charge us, and they never responded to my letters. So I had to get on a plane and fly to Reykjavik and demand that they arrest me. And I was met at the airport in January of 1988 by 150 police officers. It was quite impressive. And the chief immigration officer, and he said, Captain Watson, how long do you intend to stay in Iceland? I said, I don't know. 5 days, 5 minutes, 5 years, you tell me. We have to go to interrogation. I said, sounds good. Sounds like fun, let's go. And we sat down, and they said, are you admitting to sinking these 2 ships? Well, not only did we sink them, but we're going to sink the other 2 at the first opportunity. Well, and the next morning, 2 police officers came and escorted me to the airport and put me on a plane, sent me back to New York City. And I said, what's going on? He says, well, we're just following orders. And what I didn't know is that the Minister of Justice stood up in the House of Parliament that day, and he says, who the hell does he think he is? He comes into our country and demands to be arrested. Get him out of here. They knew that to put me on trial would be to put Iceland on trial. And last year, I was giving a lecture of all places at the FBI Academy in Quantico in Virginia. And they actually paid me to give them a lecture. And one of the special agents said, well, you know, Sea Shepherd's walking a pretty damn fine line when it comes to the law. I said, yeah, but who cares how fine it is as long as you don't cross the line? We haven't crossed that line. And so they had to admit to the logic of that. But they said, you know, a lot of people have joined Sea Shepherd and gone on to become eco-terrorists. I said, really? What's that got to do with me? Well, you know, you trained them. You're responsible. I said, oh, yeah, I got 3 names for you. Lee Harvey Oswald, Timothy McVeigh, and Osama bin Laden. You trained them. Yeah. So I can't be responsible for what a few people out of my 5,000 volunteers have done over the last few years. The point is that Sea Shepherd does not break the law. Back in 1985, I had a Tibetan Buddhist monk approach me in Seattle, and he gave me this little statue, and I didn't know what it was, but he says, I've been asked to give this to you and to put it up on your mast, and it'll protect you. I said, oh, okay, fine. You know, if a Tibetan Buddhist monk gives you a little thing and asks you to put you on the mast, why not put it up there? I did that, didn't really think much of it. It was a little horse-headed winged dragon-looking thing, and so anyway, in 1989, I had the very great privilege of meeting with and having lunch with the Dalai Lama, and I asked him about this. And he says, found out he had sent it to us. And no explanation, he just sent it to us. And I said, well, what is it? And he says, well, it's the symbol for, it's called Hayagriva. And I said, well, what's that mean? He says, well, it's the symbol for the compassionate aspect of Buddha's wrath. Ooh, well, what's that mean? He said, well, he looked at me and he said, well, you never want to injure anybody, but sometimes when they cannot see enlightenment, scare the hell out of them until they do. And that's why our ships are black and we fly the Jolly Roger. It's more of an intimidation thing than anything else. And it works. I mean, the stories on the internet about what I do out there are mind-boggling. The number of people I've killed, the ships that I've sunk and machine gunned the survivors. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing. But, you know, it actually works in our favor because when we show up, they're scared to death of us. And so we win a lot of battles just by showing up. Last year, for instance, we went into Libyan waters to go after poachers, found a poaching operation. Our guys got in the nets, slashed open the nets, and released 800 of these magnificent fish. And the Libyan Navy was chasing us around for a while, but they don't seem to be too good at catching anybody, especially lately. But we were able to get away from them. We've had a lot of confrontations in the past with different navies, and one of the things I've discovered about navies is that they don't know how to deal with no. So, for instance, once we landed in Soviet Siberia to get evidence on illegal whaling operations, and it was rather an interesting sort of event because nobody since 1945 had actually invaded the Soviet Union. So we landed on the beach, and our ship was offshore, and there's 2 Soviet soldiers patrolling the beach, and they just ignored us. They assumed we had to be Russians. Who else would be landing on the beach? So for 45 minutes, we documented everything and found out that they were killing whales to feed to mink and sable and fox on their commercial fur farms, which was a violation. So we got the evidence, and we were heading back, and I was pushing the Zodiac into the water when a Soviet soldier came up, and he pointed at our inflatable boat, and he said, "Что это?" What is that? And I said, "Oh, it's a Zodiac. It's a Zodiac." And he looked up, and he said, "No, it's a Mercury, American." And I looked at our outboard engine, I looked at him, and oh yeah, forgot about that little detail. So I turned my back on him and began to push the boat out, and I said to the two guys in the boat, one who was a UPI photographer, said, "What's he doing?" "He's taking his gun down." I said, "For God's sake, start waving and laughing and smiling at him." Which they did, and that confused him. And it's hard to shoot somebody when they're smiling and waving at you. And so I managed to get the boat back in the water, and we got back to our ship, and we were cruising down the coast of Siberia, feeling really good that we got away with this one. 45 minutes later, 2 helicopter gunships came out of nowhere and started strafing us across the bow, and I said, well, we'll just ignore them. They may go away. And 45 minutes after that, a large Soviet frigate pulled up alongside us, and the captain's voice came out on the radio and says, "Sea Shepherd, stop your ship immediately and prepare to be boarded by Soviet Union." I said, "Captain, we don't have room for the Soviet Union. We're not stopping for you." And that so confused him and bought us the time to get back into U.S. waters because, these guys just do not know how to deal with no. And that saved us on many occasions because they're used to just using intimidation, and everybody just sort of surrenders when they see the guns. But we've managed to pull it off over the years. The reason I do what I do is because of an experience that I had in June of 1975. And I was one of the, like I said, one of the founding directors of Greenpeace, and one of the people who put together the first whale campaigns to go and protect whales. And we were dealing at that time with the Soviet whaling fleet, which was operating off the coast of California at the time. This is before the 200-mile limit. So we found the Soviet fleet about 60 miles off the coast of Northern California. And we were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time, and we thought all we had to do was just get our bodies between the harpoons and the whales, and they wouldn't kill the whales, we'd just do that. And so after a year of planning, Bob Hunter and I found ourselves in a small little inflatable boat in front of a 150-foot Soviet harpoon vessel that was bearing down on us at full speed in very rough waters, and in front of us, 8 magnificent sperm whales that were fleeing for their life. And every time the harpooner managed to try and get an aim or a bead on one of the whales, I would maneuver the boat and block his path. And this worked great for about 25 minutes until the captain came down the catwalk and screamed into the ear of the harpooner, then turned to us, smiled, and brought his finger across his neck. And that's when I realized rather quickly that Gandhi wasn't going to work for us that day. And a few moments later, there's this horrendous explosion, and this 150-pound grenade-tipped harpoon flew directly over our head, and the line slashed down, narrowly missing us, slammed into the back of one of the whales, a female in the pod of 8 sperm whales in front of us, and she screamed. It was like a woman screaming. It never occurred to me that a whale could scream and sound so much like a person. And she rolled on her side in a fountain of blood, and suddenly the largest whale in that pod slammed the water with his tail and disappeared, and he swam directly underneath of us. And that was a large male turning to defend his pod against these killers. And he swam underneath of us and threw himself, literally hurled himself out of the water straight at the harpooner on the Soviet vessel in order to defend his pod. But they were waiting for him, and they had put an unattached harpoon back into the cannon. And at point-blank range, he pulled the trigger and hit the whale in the head. And the whale fell back screaming and rolling in agony on the surface. And here we were in this little inflatable boat between 2 dying whales, and the water was, filling up and turning blood red all around us. And as the whale rolled about on the surface, I caught his eye, and he looked straight at us and dove. And I saw all these bloody bubbles coming at us real fast. And the whale came up and out of the water at an angle, so that the next move was to come right down on top of us. And I watched this head rise from the surface of the sea. And as his head rose up, I looked into an eye the size of my fist right there, and what I saw changed my life forever, because I saw understanding. He understood what we were trying to do, because I could see the effort he made to pull himself back as his muscles tensed and he began to sink back into the sea, and I saw his eye disappear beneath the surface, and he died. Could have killed us and chose not to do so. So I'm personally indebted to that whale for the fact that I'm alive. But also I saw something else in that eye, and it was pity. And not for himself, but for us, that we could kill so senselessly. And for what reason? Why were the Russians killing sperm whales? They didn't eat them. They processed sperm whales into oil used for high heat-resistant machinery. And one of the things that the Soviets used it for, the same as the U.S. has used it for, is for lubricating oil for intercontinental ballistic missiles. And I said, here we are, destroying this incredibly intelligent, socially complex, beautiful creature for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me. We are insane. And from that moment on, I said, I'm not working for people. I don't do this for people. I do this for them, for the whales and for the creatures of the sea, which pretty much makes us immune to criticism because, quite frankly, I don't give a damn what people say about our methods. As long as we're not killing anybody or injuring anybody or breaking the law, it doesn't really concern me if people are for or against us. When we sank those ships in Iceland, I had a former colleague from Greenpeace came up and he said, I just want to let you know that what you did in Iceland was despicable, reprehensible, criminal, and unforgivable. I said, so? And he says, I think you should know what people in this movement think about what you did. I said, John, we didn't sink those whaling ships for you or Greenpeace or anybody else. We sank them for the whales. You find me one whale anywhere on this planet that disagreed with what we did that day, and I promise you we won't do it again. But until then, we will continue to do what we do. We've sent over 9 whaling ships to the bottom, and we just drove, like I said, the Japanese whaling fleet out of the Southern Ocean Whale Sanctuary. But it's not just whales that we're dealing with. That's probably we're most well known for that because a few years ago I went to all the networks and I said, you know, the biggest show on Discovery right now is a bunch of guys going out into some remote cold waters in rough weather to catch crabs. I can give you men and women from around the world going into far more remote waters, far colder waters, for the purpose of saving whales. And we'll throw in icebergs and penguins in there just to make it interesting. And they went for it. Well, first of all, they all rejected it. It was basically too dangerous. But then Marjorie Courtney, when she became president of Animal Planet, she said, I'll take the job if you allow me to do this show. So I was brought back, and they decided to take the risk, and it's now their #1 show on Animal Planet. And actually, hopefully, this is the last show because if the Japanese don't come back, that's the end of the show. But we were the only television show that was actually on the air, trying to get ourselves thrown off the air. And I think we may have accomplished that, which is a good thing. Although now they're talking to us about doing shark wars and seal wars and fish wars, and I don't know. There's too many wars on there. Parking wars is on there now, and everything. It's getting a little overused, I think, but you know, although one of the things that we discovered is that if you're going to do anything, you have to really have a clear understanding of the culture that we live in, and that culture is a media culture where the media dictates reality. Something is real if it's on television. If it isn't, it's not real. They're making a motion picture about what Sea Shepherd's doing, and when Christian Bale, who's actually supposed to be either Ewan McGregor, I don't know, they haven't decided. Whenever if they're going to be me, they're going to be more me than I've ever been me, because movies and television are more real than real life, and everything, of course, that we've done will become more acceptable because it's in a movie. You know, a lot of people thought, for instance, that I should have been upset last year when South Park made a big parody about what we did and called me all sorts of things. I think I was called a turd and a liar and everything. I didn't really care. But the South Park guys got really upset because I wrote back and said, this is wonderful. I thought this is a wonderful show, and we're going to print our own South Park T-shirts because you put your guy on our ship, and that means he's automatically signed his rights over to us to use his image. So we now have our own line of sight. And I said, if you don't like it, you can sue me. They got really upset about that because almost everybody they portray gets upset with them, and I wasn't upset. I said, my God, you got us on South Park. You got to really be part of the popular culture to get on there. So, hey, we're stoked. You know, we love the show. And but this is what you have to do is to get, to get through on these, is to do that. Because, like I said, media dictates reality. And it also dictates our values as to what is important and what isn't. And unfortunately, for the most part, the media dictates some pretty shallow values. And it's we got to get in there and, mix it up so we can try and get some things across. And one of the values that the media tries to get across, for instance, a few years ago, anybody ever watch Captain Planet? And, Captain Planet, the Planeteers back there, I think it was the 80s or something. But I was actually a consultant for Captain Planet until I made the mistake of actually giving some advice in public, and then I was no longer welcome as a consultant. But they actually had this environmental film festival in Santa Monica, and they had 500 school children, and they were airing Captain Planet, and it was a segment where Captain Planet goes out and starts sinking boats to save whales and fish, which seemed like, they were basically making a show about what we were doing. And I watched this with the children, and at the end, the producer says, any questions? And I said, well, Barbara, I got a question. I said, you got Captain Planet going out there and taking the law into his own hands, and he's sinking ships and destroying property to save whales, and I don't have a problem with that, but you're telling all these children here it's perfectly okay to take the law into their own hands and sink ships to save whales, and I don't have a problem with that either. But what I do have a problem with is how come when we do this, your network calls us eco-terrorists? So why are you telling these children it's perfectly okay to solve the problem by methods that you would never endorse in real life? No wonder children are confused. And the fact is that we try to solve all of our problems through fantasies. Can't win the war in Vietnam? Doesn't matter. Sylvester Stallone did it with Rambo. So this is the way we perceive reality, is, again, on television or in that. And just look at our values. For instance, imagine for a moment walking into Mecca. Walk up to the black stone and spit on it. Ooh, your chances of walking out of town that day are going to be pretty remote, and nobody's going to have much sympathy for you. You just committed an act of blasphemy, and you've insulted a great number of people. Or walk into Jerusalem and with a pickaxe and starts hacking away at the Wailing Wall, see how far you're going to get. You're going to get an Israeli soldier's bullet in the back, and nobody's going to have much sympathy for you. You committed an act of blasphemy and insulted a great number of people. Or walk into Rome and take a hammer to the Pieta and see how far you're going to get there. The fact is, these are things that are sacred to people, and therefore we are very upset if anything happens to them. But each and every day we go into the most beautifully profound and exquisite cathedrals in the world. The rainforests of Amazonia, the redwood forests of California, the Great Barrier Reef off of Australia, and totally desecrate and destroy these cathedrals. And what do? A few people dress up in animal costumes and jump up and down with protest signs, but that's pretty much it. And the fact is if the rainforests, if the Great Barrier Reef, if all these things were as sacred to us, if we value them as much as an old meteorite in Mecca, an old wall in Jerusalem, or a hunk of marble in Rome, we would literally rise up and risk our lives and fight to protect them. But we don't have that because they're not relevant to our reality as the media has dictated it to us. We're alienated from the natural world. Right now, we're living in the greatest extinction event in the last 65.2 million years. As Richard Leakey described it, the sixth major extinction event in world history. It's even got a name, the Holocene. And between 2000 and 2065, we will lose more species of plants and animals than we've lost in the last 65 million years. And we will be responsible for that, a major extinction event. And it takes the planet 15 to 20 million years to recover from a major extinction event. But what does that mean? I think if you look at it this way, that we're on a spaceship. That's what the Earth is. It's a spaceship, and it's traveling through space. I think collectively our speed is 500 miles a second, I think is what we're moving at right now. So it's a pretty good spaceship. But like all spaceships, it has a life support system. And our life support system is the biosphere. Provides the air we breathe, the food we eat, cleans up our waste. It's the life support system. And the species on this planet are divided into two groups, crew and passengers. Humans are passengers. We're having a great time entertaining ourselves. It's just wonderful being here and everything, but we're not running the ship. The crew is. And the crew are more important than we are because they can live without us, but we can't live without them. We need them. They don't need us. 2 years ago, I wrote an essay where the Fox Network took me to task, which was a compliment, really. But they said that they were upset because I made a statement where I said worms are more important than people. Oh, my God, everybody was outraged. How dare you say that worms are more important than people? Well, the reason I said it is because worms are more important than people. And the reason for that is worms can live here without us, but we can't live without them. We need them. And we need bees, and we need insects, and we need bacteria. In fact, our own bodies, we might think that we're individuals, but each and every one of us is carrying between 600 and 1,000 species of bacteria within our body that digests our food for us and produces vitamins. We're actually symbionts. We're not one organism. We're actually a collection of hundreds of organisms, but we just forget all that. And that's the crew that's running our body. We have these other species that crew our own bodies and also support the life support system on the planet. If I was to go into my engine room and I saw my engineers popping rivets out of the hull, and I said to them, well, what are you guys doing? So, we get $1 apiece when we get back to port for these things. Oh, really? Oh, well, if I was an irresponsible captain, as our most irresponsible world leaders, I would say, oh, well, count me on for some of that profit. And they're going to pop one rivet too many, and the hull's going to collapse, and the ship's going to sink. Now, if you look at every species on the planet as a rivet in the hull of the biosphere, and we're popping rivets left, right, and center, at some point we're going to pop one rivet too many, and the biosphere is going to collapse, and we're going to have some serious problems. No species can live and survive on this planet without living in accordance with the basic laws of ecology. And there's three basic laws. The law of diversity, that the strength of an ecosystem is dependent upon diversity within it. The law of interdependence, that those species are interdependent with each other. Or as John Muir once said, if you tug on any part of the earth, you'll find that it's intimately connected to every other part of the earth. And the law of finite resources, a limit to carrying capacity, a limit to growth. And for our numbers to continue to grow and our consumption to increase means that we literally have to steal the carrying capacity from other species, and they have to go extinct for us to continue to grow like this. But again, that violates the laws of diversity and the law of interdependence, and it will crash. And of course, everybody will wonder how that happened. Well, the warning signs have been around for a long time, but we're easily distracted. We're basically human beings are really overly conceited naked apes who are divine legends in our own mind, and we go about our business completely oblivious to the real laws of how this planet operates. For the most part, it's somewhere else. We live in a fantasy world for the most part. In fact, one way to actually illustrate this is that our international environmental movement, conservationists, not very big. In fact, there are more subscribers to Warcraft than there are in all of the major organizations combined. So there are more people paying their $15 a month to pretend to be killing people on other planets than there are that are actually members of active environmental organizations. So I find that, a little daunting. But at the same time, when people say, don't you get depressed? No, I'm very optimistic. I feel that there are answers to problems, and these answers lie in the fact that the answers are impossible. But I think the impossible can become possible. And all we need to do is exercise our imagination and our passion to come up with answers to these problems. In 1972, the very idea that Nelson Mandela would be president of South Africa was unimaginable, unthinkable, and impossible, and yet he became president of South Africa. And therefore, I think that all of the problems that we face today, if we utilize our imagination and work at it with passion, that we will be able to solve many of these problems. My organization is volunteer-driven because I could not pay people to do the kind of things that my volunteers do for nothing. That kind of passion has to come from the heart and can't be motivated by any other means. One of the criticisms we get on Whale Wars is, we're all a bunch of amateurs and we don't know what we're doing and we're incompetent. Yeah, well, that may be true. But we've never had anybody injured, we've never had an oil spill, we've never went aground, we've never had a fire on board, and we have an unblemished safety record. The professional mariners on the whaling fleet, 3 deaths, numerous injuries, 2 catastrophic fires, and 2 major oil spills. So why? Because we have a passionate crew that are very, very cautious in their approach. May not look like it sometimes, but the fact is that we have that unblemished safety record. And we've successfully mounted 7 campaigns to the Southern Ocean, the most hostile environment on the planet, without any problems whatsoever. So whatever the perception of what we are, it is completely at odds with who we really are. And my officers are extremely experienced. My crew are not, because I try to give as many people as possible the opportunity to participate. And they come from all over the world. So this last campaign, I took 88 crew members on 3 vessels to the Southern Ocean, and they were from 23 different nations, including 2 people from Japan. So it's truly an international effort in that respect. Right now we have 3 ships, the Steve Irwin, which we named after Steve Irwin, and that's our flagship. The Bob Barker, Bob gave us $5 million, so I named a ship after him. He was actually reluctant to have the name, but I convinced him it would be a good idea, so he went along with it. And our 3rd vessel is that fast interceptor vessel you saw on there, and that's the Gojira, which in Japanese means Godzilla, and which actually translated means gorilla whale, of all things. And I just couldn't resist it, and we finally got it on tape, with the Japanese whaler saying, "Oh, Gojira!" And the headlines in Japan saying Godzilla stopped the whaling fleet, and that was good. But unfortunately, we're going to have to change the name because the only thing more frightening than Godzilla is Godzilla's lawyers, and they don't like the fact that we're using the name, so we'll be doing a name change next month. So, but we did manage to get that Godzilla thing into the Japanese newspapers, which I was quite happy about. And so Our vessels now, from here where we're going, is that the Bob Barker heads up next week to Palau, because 2 weeks ago I went to Palau and signed an agreement, a historic agreement, with the President of the Republic of Palau, and Sea Shepherd is now the official enforcement agency for the Palau government. So we will go in there and start to locate and kick out poachers in the Palau territorial waters. This is similar to a program that we've had in place for 10 years in the Galapagos Islands, where over the last 10 years, we've seized 65 poaching vessels, 250,000 shark fins, and have thrown dozens of poachers in jail through our interceptions in the Galapagos Park Marine Reserve. The Steve Irwin leaves on Tuesday to go to the Mediterranean by way of the Suez Canal. The Gojira is now in Galapagos and is heading through the Panama Canal, and both of them will meet in southern France in mid-May, where I will join it, and then we will go down into Libyan waters to go after poachers down there. So we're operating worldwide, and it is a Navy, and it's expensive, but and we wouldn't be able to do it without the fact that we had all of these incredible volunteers. So really, our organization is driven by the passion of those people, and I'm certainly indebted to all of those people from all over the world for helping us to do what we do. And we get our support. We don't spend. The other thing about our organization that's unique is that we don't spend money on. We don't do direct mail campaigns. We don't buy advertising. We don't spend any money on fundraising. It's all word of mouth, and it's worked very well. We've grown very slowly over the years, but we've grown with a strong, loyal membership. And that's the way we want to continue to be, a small organization that can make a decision at a moment's notice to intercept and get involved in things. And that's what we will continue to do. What we're trying to do right now is extend what we're doing in the Galapagos and Palau right across the South Pacific, so that we will be able to get enforcement vessels and crews into all of the Southern Pacific island systems. We talked 2 weeks ago with the president of Tahiti, who's very interested, and we're also talking to the Cook Islands. And in the past, we've worked with the rangers of Cocos Island off Costa Rica and the rangers off of Mapelo off of Colombia. And we've provided them with everything from from generators to uniforms to rifles to whatever they need in order to do enforcement work. And that's the kind of projects that we're continuing to get involved in. One of the big problems, of course, is that for the most part, everything in the ocean is out of sight and out of mind, especially if you live in Iowa. What we have to realize is that we cannot live on this planet with a dead ocean. The ocean, the protection of our oceans is one of the most essential things that we can be involved in. We're overfishing the oceans. We've taken 90% out of the fish of the oceans already. Every single commercial fishery in the world, except for the Alaska wild salmon industry, is in a state of collapse, mainly because we don't understand the nature of fish. I mean, fish are fish, as from what we can see. I mean, a salmon takes 4 years to become sexually mature and dies, but an orange roughy takes 45 years to become sexually mature and lives to be 150 years of age. And cod can live to be well over a century. Sharks can live to be 200 years of age. They cannot keep up with our incredible demand on their populations. The bluefin tuna is a good example of that, and one of the reasons that we're focusing on it. It should be an endangered species. Its numbers are now 8% of its original numbers, and yet they're still being hunted because last year at the Convention on the International Trade in Endangered Species, Japan and China bribed all of the smaller countries to order to vote against it. And every single marine species, 5 species of sharks, 2 species of coral, and the polar bear, and the tuna, the bluefin tuna, were not listed because of that kind of bribery, which pretty much undermined the credibility of CITES, and we really can't trust them anymore in the future because of that. And that's one of the reasons the president of the nation of Palau came to us, because he says, "I've never seen anything more blatant than what the Japanese did to us last year on that." And Palau was not one of those countries that was bribed. But the bluefin tuna will go extinct. But the companies that are fishing it don't care. In fact, they want the bluefin tuna to go extinct, and many of our fishing corporations want exactly that. And that might sound a little bizarre, but the economics of it make sense. The economics of extinction, as I call it. Because the more bluefin tuna you catch and pack into warehouses, the fewer there are in the ocean. Mitsubishi already has a 5-year supply packed quick frozen in warehouses in Japan. They're trying to get a 10 to 15-year supply. And the more they pull out of the ocean, the fewer there are, and scarcity translates into an increase in prices. And the average price of a bluefin tuna right now is $75,000 US. Most expensive fish on the planet. Some of them have sold for $250,000. So what happens when you wipe them out? the price of that commodity in the warehouse increases incredibly high. And you're looking at $1 million fish. If that's the only fish that are left on the planet, they're going to pay to get it. Scarcity translates into higher values, and extinction, you corner the market. So they're looking at extinction as an investment. There are very few fishermen in the world today. They've been replaced by corporations. And those corporations are literally raping our oceans. Last year when we went in and released the tuna from the nets off of Libya, the first people who came out and applauded what we did were the artisanal fishermen of Malta, who said somebody's got to do something about it. Those people who have been struggling, to make a living as fishermen with their small little boats, they're the ones who are really the victims of these big corporate enterprises. Because what happens is as the fish populations decrease, more and more money is put into technology to catch what is left. I think Rayathon sums it up best with their motto, the fish can run, but they can't hide. They actually market their product under, their fish finders under that. And that's the problem, is they can't hide. We could take a lesson from the Polynesians. A few hundred years ago, they had a way of conserving fish. The shamans would just literally say, well, this bay is taboo. Hanauma Bay in Hawaii, taboo. For 25 years. We catch you fishing there, you're dead. They were very strict on enforcement. And what we need right now, the entire Mediterranean should be taboo. The Grand Banks in Newfoundland should be taboo. No fishing by anyone for any reason, anywhere, because otherwise we're going to destroy the oceans. The United Nations has predicted that by 2048, every single commercial fishery will have collapsed. There will be no fishing industry because there will not be any fish. And the value of a fish in the water, maintaining the integrity of the oceanic ecosystems is far more valuable than on anybody's plate. The other problem is 40% of all of the fish being taken from the ocean are not eaten by people. They're fed to livestock. We're feeding the oceans to livestock. The fishery for sand eels in the North Atlantic is taking sand eels for the sole purpose of feeding to chickens on factory farms in Denmark, and they're eating more fish than all of the puffins in the North Atlantic put together. Domestic house cats are eating more fish than all the world's seals put together. And we're feeding fish to pigs and to other species. And most incredibly, we're catching 75 fish out of the ocean to raise one salmon on a salmon farm. And so farm-raised fish are certainly not an alternative to wild species. And, of course, we tolerate things that we didn't otherwise tolerate for the fact that the salmon on the salmon farms in Tasmania, Chile, where there was no salmon, and in British Columbia are exotics. The Atlantic salmon that have no business being in the Pacific Ocean at all. But for somehow or other, they get special dispensation to transport their exotics and put them into a foreign or an alien ecosystem. Money buys that kind of dispensation, and it also is destroying the natural environment. The oceans provide 80% of our oxygen supply, and right now they're talking about mass harvesting of plankton in the Southern Ocean. Norway and Japan are working on this to produce a protein paste to feed the livestock. So we're going to take out the plankton in order to feed livestock. And that kind of thing is a kind of insanity which is going to destroy our oceans. And quite frankly, if the oceans die, we die. There's no future. So the protection of our oceans is probably one of those most important things that we can address. This is the water planet. It's not Earth. Most of it's covered by water, and all of the ecosystems in there are the same. Sharks are down to about 10% of their original numbers, but who wants to save sharks? Except for the fact that the shark has molded evolution in our oceans for 450 million years, that every fish that you see, its camouflage, its speed, its behavior, has been evolved that way because of the shark. The shark is the apex predator in the ocean. We need sharks. But, oh my God, they're monsters. Yes, sharks kill on average 5 people a year. We kill 80 million of them. By the way, ostriches kill on average 100 people a year, so ostriches are 20 times more dangerous than sharks, but nobody wants to wipe them out. And soda pop machines falling on people kill 9 people a year, so your Coke machine is more dangerous than a shark. And it's actually more dangerous to play golf than it is to go diving with sharks, because more people are killed every year by being struck by lightning on golf courses than are killed by sharks. But those are the kind of statistics that people just don't think too much about. We've swum with sharks. We swim with them all the time. We've got footage of swimming with great white sharks. I've got a group within Sea Shepherd called the Shark Angels, which are 3 women who go and swim with sharks just to prove that they're not the dangerous monsters that everybody thinks they are. You might notice if you ever see Shark Week, unfortunately on Discovery, you might see the sharks viciously attacking the cages. That's because they're throwing blood and guts into the water. But yet, just notice next time, the guy who's taking the film, the cameraman, is not in a cage. The shark's ignoring him. He's going after the blood and guts in the water, which happen to be around the cage. So, a lot of this stuff is just propaganda when it comes to sharks. I find sharks to be incredibly shy creatures. Just try I got a horrible headache in the Galapagos one time trying to get into a film footage with the hammerheads because you have to hold your breath because as soon as they see their bubbles, they're gone. So, you got to hold your breath and dash out behind the rock, get the picture, and then start breathing again. So they're very, very shy creatures and very, very difficult to get on film. We made a film called Shark Water, which was for the reason being was in order to show sharks in a different light, and I think it was quite successful. We do a lot of films like that. Of course, you might be familiar with one of the films that we worked on called The Cove, which won the Academy Award last year. And that was started by Sea Shepherd in 2003 when we first went to Iki Island and then again to Taiji to protect dolphins. So we look on the camera as the most important weapon in our struggle to protect the oceans. And we develop other weapon systems too on our ships. Nothing lethal. We have stink bombs, which is rotten butter, and water cannons and balloon launchers and paintballs and things like that. But we design everything to make sure that nobody is going to be injured. But we do defend ourselves with it in that way. And when we go out there, we put a line of it looks like a porcupine with all the spikes around. Like this month, we'll be sailing up the coast of Somalia, so the spikes will be out, and we'll have the stink bombs ready. And last year, we were approached by some pirates off there, but as soon as they saw the spikes, they retreated. So, we're not too concerned about it this year. But anyway, this is what we're going to do with our ships, is continue to patrol the world's oceans, because ultimately what I would like to see is an international policing body that is empowered to police our oceans, because outside of the 200-mile limit, it's the Wild West. We have all of the laws and the treaties and the regulations we need to protect the oceans. The problem is we have no enforcement. There's a lack of economic and political will to enforce. No money in it. Ultimately, it's our very survival. But this is what we're hoping to try and motivate that be set up, that we don't have to be vigilantes, that there will be an established organization that can take over what we started. That's ultimately what we wish to do. But in the meantime, we'll continue to be doing what we're doing because we're buying time, we're buying lives, bit by bit, and hopefully that will make a difference in the long run. And we pick our targets where we can figure we can actually make an impact, and we look at it as like an acupuncture needle. So we go in there and stimulate a response and get a reaction. As a conservationist, I say things that people don't want to hear and do things that people don't like to see being done because my business is basically pissing people off because they are the problem. Then the people we oppose get angry at us, and the angrier they get and the more enemies that we recruit, the more successful I think we're being. If I don't get a death threat once a week, then I don't think I'm doing my job. And we're getting lots of death threats. But not too concerned about the threats. It's the ones that don't make the threats you got to be concerned about. But anyway, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to continue to act in a responsible manner. And by that means, we will not do anything that will injure anybody, and we will not break the laws, although, again, there's that perception that we do. The only time we've ever actually been convicted of anything, they weren't felonies, was breaking the Seal Protection Act in Canada by trying to protect seals, because Canada is an unusual case. In Canada, under the Seal Protection Act, it's illegal to witness a seal being killed. It's illegal to film or photograph a seal being killed. If you saw a seal being killed, you can be punished by a year in prison, $45,000 fine. So that's an interesting case. And we actually went to court. We actually got ourselves arrested in Canada so we could challenge the law. And we discovered something very interesting about Canada. And by the way, I'm a citizen of both Canada and the United States. So when I went into court, I challenged them on the fact that the Seal Protection Act was a violation of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And the judge said, yes, it is. It is a violation of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But, and this is where we discovered something about Canada, the government has a right to violate the Charter. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms has a thing called the Notwithstanding Clause, which says that these rights and freedoms are guaranteed except when the government chooses not to guarantee them. So what's the point of having them? In other words, in Canada, you have freedom of speech until you speak. You have freedom of expression until you express yourself. So those kind of weird freedoms are not kind of freedoms that I think are very important. And we didn't even discover them because it's very small print on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. But anyway, discovered that, but I can proudly say that after many years of fighting the seal hunt, it's virtually over because we went and spoke the language they understood, economics. We went to Europe and had seal products banned. And this month, they're banned in China, and they're banned in Russia. Canada has no market for its seal pelts. And in response to that, what did they do this year? They set the quota at 468,000 seal pups, the highest quota in history. That's Canada saying, oh yeah, well this is what we're going to do. But they're not going to kill that many. They're not going to kill even a fraction of that because ultimately the sealers are practical people and there's no money in it. That's the language that is best understood, economics. That's what we spoke to the Japanese whaling fleet. We negated their profits. We took away their profits. And that's the only thing that really is understood. And so what we do is to go in there and negate those profits. So what I said to the Japanese right from the beginning is, we're here to sink you economically, to bankrupt you. And when the Japanese fleet left this year, they left to go back with a $200 million debt and subsidy payments to the Japanese government. We bankrupted them. And that is the way to get through to the opposition. Speak that language, dollars and cents, because they're not interested in your ethics. They're not interested in morality. They're not interested in politics, and they're not interested in ecology, but they sure as hell are interested in their pocketbooks. And if you can hit them there, then you can stop them. Thank you. And I think there's time for questions. How much time?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi. I guess I was a little bit curious about kind of what you said about safety, how you have an unblemished safety record and stuff like that. It really seems like in some of the episodes that's really not the main concern. Like, I believe there was one episode where you went into a iceberg-infested waters with a non-ice rated boat. Mm-hmm. Woke up in the morning to find yourself surrounded by icebergs, and it seemed like the whole ship could have sunk.
Mm-hmm.
How is that looking out for the safety of your crew?
Absolutely.
How is sending somebody out on a jet ski, and then when you don't hear back from them, just being like, oh, I guess they're gone, and then they happen to come back?
Easily explained, it's television, and they over-dramatize everything. I'm a very experienced ice navigator, and one of the things you didn't see on the television show is my interview while we were going through the ice, because I said, there's not really a problem here. And when you saw the guys that were in the area and the hull's going to breach and the ice is going to come through and it seems very dramatic, what did I say at the time at the camera, which was not used? It doesn't matter if you breach the hull, because I was putting the pressure of the ice on that particular part of the hull for a very good reason. It's a watertight compartment. And if it had a breach, and I had to put the pressure somewhere, if it had a breach, the water would have filled that compartment to the level equal to the outside of the ship, which would be about waist high. And then after we got out of the ice, I would simply patch it up and pump it out. So I wasn't too concerned about sinking the ship. There was no danger of that. So there's ways of, I've moved ships through ice for years, so I wasn't really overly concerned about it. In fact, I was watching that with Shannon Mann, who is one of our crew members. We were watching the episode, and I turned to Shannon, I said, do you think we're going to make it? You know?
Well, why would you go there with a non-ice rated boat?
The whaling ships are not ice rated either, because I need boats that have speed. Ice-class vessels don't have the speed, so I need speed. So the risk was worth taking. We're in sloppy, what we call garbage ice. It's not the hardened ice that we actually deal with off the east coast of Canada. We've gone through that stuff in the wintertime, and that is dangerous. But the stuff that we find down in Antarctica is slop ice. It's we have to watch out for growlers. But when you're going through the actual packs, they break up fairly easy, as you could see on the film. We push through those things. So we've never had any problems as far as breaching our hull or or ice damage at all. But the television show, of course, overly dramatizes a lot of these things. You might have seen one episode, I don't know if you did, but we had a power blackout, which is quite regular on ships. It lasts about 3 minutes until we just switch over. We have 3 generators, switch over to another generator. They turned that into a 1-hour show about how the ship was going to be sunk. And it's suspended disbelief. People were actually watching as Pedro Montero works frantically to get the generator online. If you notice, the entire engine room is lit up while he's doing that.
How do you draw the line between when people want to go risk their lives to do something that might not really be worth risking your life for, like
That's
go
their
out
choice.
on a jet ski in the middle of the night alone?
That's their choice.
How do you say, as the captain, how do you let that happen?
Well, first of all, nobody went out alone on a jet ski.
Okay.
But
2
second
people.
of all, that's their choice. Every crew member who joins my crew is asked one very important question. Are you ready to risk your life to defend a whale? And if they say no, we don't take them.
Is it really defending the whale, though, if they're not doing anything practical?
I think everything we do out there is practical. People don't ask this question of when you go out to fight wars to protect oil companies. We not only risk our lives, we die to protect those profits, and that's considered okay. I think it's a far more noble endeavor to risk your life for an endangered species or habitat, and so I think those risks are acceptable. But after 35 years, never had an injury, and that's a record that I intend to keep.
Okay.
Any other questions?
What's the situation of the marine hunting corporations over in Japan because of the earthquakes? Do you have any knowledge on that? Like, are they not hunting them anymore because of the earthquakes, or are they still out hunting anything?
On the day of the tsunami, I had a 5-person crew in Iwate Prefecture, and they were monitoring dolphins that were being brought in on the boats. And my crew leader saw the water receding out of the harbor, and he got in, and they drove up to the top of a hill. Just made it. 8 minutes later, that thing hit, destroyed the entire town. He actually videotaped it. And we lost them for 40 hours. We had no idea where they were. In fact, they actually commandeered a Japanese fire truck to try and get out of there. But what they saw, that entire fishing fleet was destroyed. But they also saw something else, too, is that while they were there, that the Japanese people who had just suffered through that disaster were incredibly kind, and and everybody really understood they were in the same boat on that. This earthquake, tsunami, and radioactive disaster is destroyed Japan, and it's going to take some time to recover. We will continue to oppose them if they illegally return to the Southern Ocean, but I don't think that's going to happen. And I think it certainly has put a major dent in their fishing, because it's destroyed literally thousands of boats. And so nobody really knows what this is going to mean or where it's going to go, but we'll be monitoring the situation, very closely.
All right, thank you.
I got a couple questions for you. I just wondered if you ever had somebody who they sort of gave the impression they were volunteering, but come to find out they're actually trying to sabotage your operation.
Yeah, we've had a couple of sabotages. I had an FBI agent on board one time when we discovered it. Was great, because I just said, hey, if the FBI want to pay wages for my crew, I have no problem with that. We don't do anything illegal or covert, so it wasn't a problem at all. But he wasn't trying to sabotage it, but to get information. But we've had a couple of people attempt to sabotage the ships, but we watch this pretty closely. Nobody can just go into our engine rooms, and we always have 24-hour guards, and we have cameras all over. So, but we expect that kind of thing, and so we take precautions.
My last question is, you sort of touched on the effects of factory farming on the planet. I just was curious if you were a vegetarian yourself.
Yes, and we promote, our ships are all vegan, actually. And the reason that we promote that is because one of the most inconvenient truths about the inconvenient truth was that animal husbandry actually produces more greenhouse gas emissions than the entire automobile industry. So therefore, a meat eater, a vegetarian or a vegan driving a Hummer is contributing less to greenhouse global warming than a meat eater riding a bicycle.
Well, first of all, Paul, great job in what you do. I love what you're doing, your approach to it. I agree totally on your radical environmentalism. And I wonder, could that, your way of doing that be applied to other parts of environmentalism just besides the way you do it on sea animals and marine life? Because I think it's very successful, and I agree with you that many people will do little things and have little protests, but they really don't hit to the heart of it. And could this be applied to other parts of environmentalism?
I think if people use their imagination, they can come up with tactics and strategies that can be implemented that are effective. And we've seen this in many cases. I think that one guy, I met somebody at a film festival last year that he walked in. There was an auction on oil leases in Colorado or Wyoming, one of the two. And he walked in and he actually went in and he bid and won on all of those leases, except he didn't have any money. But they had awarded all the leases, and it was right at the end of the Bush administration, so the whole thing was in chaos, and they really couldn't put it back on the table. And so I said, well, that's fine. You can send me to jail, but you're not going to be drilling oil on this land. So that's an example of what one person could do. One of the things I should say is I think that the most effective power that we have in a movement is the passion of individuals and small groups of individuals. I don't look on big organizations to solve problems. All social revolutions throughout history were carried forth by individuals, and they made sacrifices. Governments have really never done very much. They take credit for everything. I mean, you go back to the suffragette movement. Those women were out on the streets getting beaten, thrown in jail, and everything like that. And all the while, Woodrow Wilson was attacking them and was totally opposed to them until they won. And who signed the bill, the amendment, giving women the vote? Woodrow Wilson. And what do we look at in history now? The vision of Woodrow Wilson. The bastard didn't have anything to do with it. It's all those nameless women who went out there and championed that cause that brought it about. Yes? Yeah.
Captain, by the way, Claudia says hi, and so does Sia. One question I got is for you. You're a supporter of the Wolves as well, right? Am I correct?
I founded an organization called Friends of the Wolf years ago, yeah.
Okay. I'm also a supporter and activist of the Wolves, and I'm just trying to find, ways of trying to stop the hunters, those air hunters, from hunting the packs from the air. And people that don't understand, that need to be educated, that the wolf is depicted in such a horrible light, that's such a vicious animal, that a lot of people don't understand that these wolves are not like that. If they just stop and look and educate themselves on these wolves, they don't think they'd be hunting them. We need to stop the people hunting them for their pelts and their fur and their coats and all that stuff.
Yeah. It's actually a perception that wolves, like sharks, are dangerous, when in fact there's not one authenticated case in American history of a wolf killing a human being. Not one. And, it's just all propaganda on that. But, of course, in the interests of the cattle ranchers, that's why they were eradicated.
Say, in case you haven't heard, there's a lot going on in Libya. And the French are in charge of the air war right now. If you remember what the French have done in the past, I wish you could find a safer place to maybe do good work than over there where they're dropping bombs on everybody. I'd urge you to be real careful.
Actually, I'm not too concerned about the French because we're actually very closely allied with the French Navy for some strange reason. The French like us, so we get a lot of support in their bases down in Antarctica. They wrote up a really positive article in the French naval magazine Marine, and so I'm not too concerned about them hitting us by mistake or anything. But France is actually a big support base for us. That's why I just came back from Paris. I know a lot of people say, oh my God, the French are so unappreciative of what we did in World War II. Yeah, well, we're very unappreciative of what they did in the American Revolution. If it wasn't for the French, there would be no American Revolution. There would be no United States. We forget that. So, it's been a long history between the two countries. Oh, well, Greenpeace. I sometimes feel like Dr. Frankenstein, helped create the big green monster. It's a big corporation now, unfortunately, and all of its original members have been driven out. We are the original Greenpeacers, Bob Hunter and all these people. We are the original Greenpeace people. Greenpeace can't make a decision unless it takes us a year of meetings now, and they're really good at raising money. They raised $350 million last year, but they spent $75 million in direct mail campaigns to do that. Our entire budget last year was $10 million. So, I don't like these big organizations. I'm not going to just single out Greenpeace and everything. When I was a director for the Sierra Club, we had a budget of $85 million. As a director for 3 years, I couldn't figure out what the hell we were spending the money on it, and I couldn't see the programs. All I heard was rhetoric, and all I know is that every 3 months we went to some exotic place to have a meeting, which cost an incredible amount of of members' money. And I used to look at it as a Sierra Club conversation and gourmet society. Because, oh, where are we going? Oh, Boston. Oh, that sounds like lobster, Oh, we're going to South Carolina. Oh, blue crabs, And the worst one, I thought, was when we had a meeting in Billings, Montana at a hunting lodge, and the dinner was bison and antelope. And I said, don't you guys see some sort of contradiction here? But apparently they didn't. So, I've sort of had my fill with those big organizations.
I'd like to thank you for coming to Iowa State, but before you leave, we would like to make a brief presentation. Madeline has a copy of The Great Sperm Whale by Richard Ellis that is presented to you from the University Press of Kansas.
Thank you.
Everyone, please join me in thanking Mr. Watson, and there's also a reception, and please stay for more conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. Not many people realize, Richard's actually a friend of mine. Not many people realize he's actually a dentist, but he's a damn good artist. So, so thank you.